We are 2 weeks into the set championship season, and in all honesty, you can win with anything. If there's anything to be learned from this video and looking at the decks that we're about to look at, is to understand that set championships are just anything goes, in all honesty. 15 different decks to look at here, guys. Honestly, like 15 different decks have won a Scar. Not all of these have won playmats, obviously, but they have all won Scar promos. So when we're looking at the metagame from the last several weeks, you can see here that aggro decks are standing pretty tall. Now, what's notable here is that while aggro decks are the most successful on this list, and you're seeing that these are the decks that are most commonly winning Scars, Amethyst Steel Aggro and Amber Steel Aggro, and we're going to take a look at both of those decks lists in a second here. It's to understand that just because they are winning Scars does not mean they're necessarily winning the playmats, but I won't lie, in most of the lists that I did check, even if they were just smaller events, sometimes they were the larger events. Amber Steel Mines or Amethyst Steel Doc were two decks that commonly do come up in getting wins. So it's a big deal when you're looking at this entire list here and you're seeing that that's what starts. Amethyst Steel Mid and Ruby Amethyst Control are kind of floating in there. Amber Steel Song still being successful. And then, of course, Amethyst Sapphire Control and Emerald Sapphire Bounce. Maybe we had a little something to do with that. We'll talk about that later, but maybe guys, maybe. And of course, rounding out with just about everything you can potentially think of, including a kitchen sink, all this is really showcasing to us is that the meta is as diverse as we said it was. You can honestly walk into set championships with your pet deck more than likely and be successful and kind of win a Scar. And that's really the biggest takeaway here is that we're going to look at a bunch of decks that are successful. We're going to discuss why they may be successful. But when you look at a list like this, and you can showcase over 2 weeks and successful tournaments of 30 players or more, and in all honesty, if you go down the list, if you look at ink decks right now, you can see, just like rows and rows and rows of tournaments of all different, sizes. And it's a different winner in every single one of those. It's a different deck, a different concept. All really is saying that you should really be targeting what deck you are most comfortable with rather than trying to play into some meta games. Granted, with smaller tournaments, it's 4-round tournaments, you kind of do have to be perfect. You can't really take a loss in the early rounds. This is something we're going to talk about in the podcast later on in this week. But you can see here that the diversity and the potential of winning a deck, winning with a deck of any of these, 15 different here, all the way from Amethyst Steel Aggro to Amber Steel Aggro to Amber Amethyst Aggro, even Amethyst Steel locations here, Amethyst Steel Jafar, like all of these different decks here, Sapphire Steel Aggro, Ruby, like anything you want to play is potential. So really taking the opportunity to play that deck that you want, play your pet deck that you like. It's very easy to get yourself into a top 8 and be successful if you know how to play your deck well and understand your matchups well. With that, let's take a look at some of the winning decks from the past few weeks. Taking a look at Amethyst Steel Doc, played by TFM Melissa, Lizard Kitty, whatever she wants to call herself, has picked up 1 championship playmat and 2 additional Scars for 3 Scars total. This list, very straightforward. Honestly, it is just pedal to metal characters with the occasional Strength of Raging Fire and 1 extra version of Doc, which is the Friends on the Other Side. That is basically what she is saying about this list, is that you are a straightforward aggro deck on occasion with the ability to play from behind on the draw thanks to cards like Strength of a Raging Fire, Pete, and Elsa to turn the tide in certain games. Melissa has been having success with a version of this list all the way since the side events at NACC, where she was able to go 8-2 in both side events, finishing in the top 32 of 400 plus player tournaments. Huge shout out to Melissa. She's been on a tear recently with Doc, hasn't let the dream die, and hey, ain't no party like a Doc party. Speaking of Doc parties, we also again have another version of Dig Dug. This is played by Jose here, picking up a first place victory with Amber Steel Mines. Again, this is a list that we have seen over and over again over the last 2 months. Ever since winning the 10K in Charlie's Collectible Show, this deck has been on a tear. I can say with complete honesty that this list is one of the more fun decks to play when it is rolling. There are some times where you open up your hand and you go, I can't lose. And that is a lot of fun. I do believe this deck has a lot of those types of hands where on the play, your opponent just is a no contest. They cannot catch up to you. They cannot prevent you from moving the game forward. They can't prevent you from closing the game out. This deck just does all of those things in a really competitive manner. And seeing a way for Doc to find its home in multiple different decks, as we're going to see it's in another list, even actually, even a few more decks, even that are seeing success right now, is that Doc is clearly one of the more dominant characters in Disney Lorcana, having that ability to just pay 2, put them into play, pick up 2 more cards with a body is just showing to be one of the best things you can do in Disney Lorcana. Ruby Amethyst, played by none other than No I Am Not Kendall of Team Labyrinth. He picked up a 32-player win last weekend as well, playing his old faithful. This is a list that we have seen Kendall post many versions of over the last month or so, dating back to CCS into the Star City games, all the way at his NACC run, and now once again for set championships. It's a list that continuously changes for Kendall each week. I think he does a pretty fair job of understanding his metagame locally, and he always finds success with it there. While Kendall might not have had the best run at NACC, he's been able to pick back up at set championship season, get on the roll, win scars, winning multiple different scars, and of course, picking up a championship victory this past weekend. Another version of it, we're going to continuously see different versions of Ruby Amethyst. Again, if you go on Inkdex, you do that scroll, you can just see all the different variations of how this deck can be successful. Wanted to give Kendall a shout out real quick because, you know, he's bad for the brand like Dick Burns. So again, shout out to Kendall. Great pickup win, 32-player tournament this past weekend. TFM member David Nunez has now had 2 championship mats and 3 scars picked up with his list that finished 42nd place at NACC. This is an Amethyst Steel mid-range deck that's still favoring into Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell Fast Flyer, along with Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, is the way that this list has been the difference maker for other opposing mid-range decks. We've seen a lot of different versions of this, focusing around John Silver, focusing on more top end with White Roses and Lawrence's and things like that. For the last few weekends, Nunes has stayed with the Fast Flyer and has found success with her. The end game here, of course, just being Belle, Elsa's, grinding the game out with goats and bounces and things like that. This list has really a trick of all trades and gives you the ability to be in every single matchup you are. Speaking of which, David Nunes is actually currently working on a bit of a tournament report for the last few weekends. That's going to be on our Metafy. Check that out soon. You're going to be able to find why he's found success with this list, how he's found success with this list, the different matchups that he's been really focusing on and targeting, and understanding that why this deck has been able to bring him to championship matchups is because of, you know, earlier looking at that stat with Amber Steel Aggro being the most played deck and most successful deck in set championships to get top 8s. This deck preys on that aggro matchup. It's so very good into it. So it's definitely a way to kind of like skate by once you get in the top 8, focusing on certain events had, you know, 3 or 4 Amber Steel aggro decks actually in their top 8. So a deck like this would really prevail in that type of metagame. Speaking of Metafy, their Amethyst Steel Doc guide has not had an update in a while, but recently with Melissa kind of double downing on Doc and really sticking to it, we have found more success. We're going to be updating that guide very, very soon with her initial takes from the last several weeks of playing it at NACC, playing it at her set championships the past couple weekends. She's going to give you her TLDR on the success of her version of her list. You can find that in the Metafy. The link for that will be in the pinned comments below and also in the description. Great way to support the channel is by checking out our guides and joining the support tier on Metafy, which also gets you this guide for free. So become a climber today and get this guide for free. Amber Steel Songs, played by Dick Burns, has also picked up 2 playmats and 2 scars recently. This version does not have Calhoun's. Dick did say on the podcast last week that that was a general mistake. He would definitely find room to play her. So that is just a key takeaway there, is that that is a card that this list could very well be playing, but showcasing that you don't even necessarily need the $12 to $15 rare, and you can just play this list with Plutos as the only card from Azurite Sea and still find success. The newer Floodborn Aerial that hasn't really seen play from Ursula's return has been making a big impact within the metagame. I've seen this come across certain lists now over and over again, and it's been said that like when you shift that card on turn 4, you can definitely kind of find a way, pick up a nice win. Dick is not the only player on the team to win with Amber Steel Songs. Shout out to Pave as well, and Ben. Every member of the team has found success with different decks. Also, shout out to Jonathan. Also, so there you go. 4 different members of the team have played a variation of this list and found success in set championships, picking up scars, picking up championship playmats. Tanton picked up a first place victory with Sapphire, Amethyst, Control. You guys call it Blurple. I call it Samethyst. Nonetheless, this is a very, very prime deck. I recently won a tournament with this deck as well. I think this is one of the more fun decks in Disney Lorcana. I also think it's one of the better decks on the draw. So when you're playing a best of 3 format, I do believe that this deck has the best potential to be even on the draw games because of Tipo and because of Sal the Azurite Sea. So because of that, you consistently give yourself a really good chance when ramping on 2 on the draw to still be in games and kind of keep the game very fair and even and make it more or less down to the draws of players rather than just being always behind. This version here, finding a new way to play Finders Keepers, is a version of a deck that we have seen several times since NACC. I also talked to players at NACC. If anyone recalls from a couple weeks ago, Jack was the feature Sapphire Amethyst player on the channel, and he put Finders Keepers in his list. We talked about it during the LCQs and why he found it having success. And again, certain matchups, taking a turn off to draw 3 cards when your opponent's going to play a Be Prepared or play a Sisu is a great way to counter that play because you just get to be like, yeah, it's fine. I'm going to just draw my cards and then start over again while you have to pay 7 or 8 to clear the board. That's another great card to add here. McDuck's Manor is a location that on the play, turn 1 guy, turn 2 Tipo or Azurite Sea plus another guy, turn 3 McDuck's Manor is really, really strong. Very hard to come back from that on the draw. And even if they do, they have to commit so much effort to kind of getting that off the table that while they're burning all that, you're kind of like still have all your resources. You're like, yeah, whatever. You just took 2 or 3, turns of challenging potentially on my McDuck's Manor, and it still gained me 4 or 6 lore, things like that. So that's another really great card for this list. It was a card that I was very successful with in the tournament that I played in as well. So shout out here again, just kind of proving that, hey, this deck is very real. Top 16, top 8 of NACC. It's such a good deck, such a fun deck to play. If you haven't tried Samethyst yet, tried Blurple yet, this is definitely a deck that you can try over the next 2 weeks. Michael here picking up a win with Emerald Amethyst as well. You can see here the Don Carnage is a nice addition. This character is a 5-cost inkable, 4 strength, 4 willpower, 2 lore with evasive. That's right. This card straight up 1-for-1 trades with a genie and lives to tell the tale. Awesome to see a card like that make an impact in the metagame. Definitely a card that no one was playing really before. There's been talks of it, of trying to find his way into a metagame. This is the first time that I have been able to see it and put it on the channel and say, yep, this guy did it. This is awesome. Love to see it. Aside from that, really straightforward deck. We do see the addition of Pegasus here. Pegasus plus Crab also represents a way to kind of remove a genie, but it's very, very sketch to kind of set up those plays because in all honesty, if you have a Pegasus just sitting around and then your opponent drops an Elsa, well, your Pegasus maybe gained 1 or 2 lore, but then it just sat there and then got picked off by an Elsa for free, and then you really never get the play for the genie. So because of that, I haven't really been too big of a fan of it, but it does give you another potential out to the Genie Wars, which I can respect for trying. Another doc deck, and this one is piloted by Alec Runge. It's finished to a 2nd place finish, but the real shout out here is to Harlan Sweetie, who's been really working on this list for the last several weeks. There are several videos that you can go and watch that he has put out talking about the different matchups, talking about the deck and how it's evolved over the last few weeks. So huge shout out to Harlan here, but the Alec picked up a 2nd place finish, getting that runner-up playmat with a pretty new deck to the metagame with this version of Sapphire Steel Aggro. That's right, we are playing Sapphire cards because they are good and they are powerful. not because we're trying to ramp with Tipo, not because we're trying to ramp with Azurite Sea, not because we're trying to put big fat fatties into play. We are content with our curve, and I really do love that. Scrooge McDuck has been one of my favorite cards recently to play. McDuck's Manor is phenomenal. Understanding what Baymax can do for the metagame, in all honesty, I just picked up a play set of Baymaxes from NACC that are like really, really cool, and I would love to play them. This is definitely the deck to put them in and play them and show them off if you have them laying around. I also think it's a good chance that if you haven't picked up Baymax yet, they're still probably a little bit down on the cheap end. This would be probably a good time to go pick up your Baymaxes at whatever they are at now, because there's a really good chance that if this deck goes and this deck continues into set 7 metagame with the potential new dueling cards that are coming out, which we've kind of seen, and we're going to talk about on the podcast on Thursday as well. If you're not yet, you should definitely follow the Twitch channel. That's in the description below. We're going to be talking about duel links and things like that. So this list been successful. Huge shout out to Harlan putting it on the map, and huge shout out for Alok going out there and picking up a playmat with it. That leaves none other than Teacher of Math picking up a second place finish with Baja Blast. This deck has been nothing but a blast. It has been so much fun to play. It has been so irritating for your opponents to play against. When your opponent does not understand your game plan, they are very, very far behind, and you get to pick up really, really free wins. The core of this deck, with Clarabelle, with Bend to My Will, all of the bounce mechanics of Muses, Genie, Mother Gothels, everything this deck has to offer is really, really annoying for your opponent to play against. It's so much fun. It's so powerful. And it really has the ability to just take over games and, just end them. That's what this deck does. Bend to My Will just ends games for so many different players when they are least expecting it. As the deck has caught more favor and more hype, maybe it's not as easy to pull those things off. But hey, not everyone watches YouTube. Not everyone pays attention to Twitter. So when you can have the opportunity to pick up some games like that with a deck like this, I promise you, you will enjoy playing it. Really, that is just showcasing that 15 different decks found a way to win a Scar in tournaments of 30 players or more. That is the big takeaway here, is that set championships is just play what you love. It is nothing better than saying, man, I have to go play Ruby Sapphire because it's like the best. You don't have to. Don't play it. Oh, I love Ruby Amethyst, and I just want to play Amber Steel this weekend, but I'm afraid. No, just play what you love. Play what you want. That's the big key takeaway from this few weeks of set championships. Anything can win a Scar, guys. If you believe in it, if you're that good with your deck, I don't care if it is Ruby Steel. It does not matter. You likely have the ability to find a couple wins, get yourself in a top 8, and win a Scar. If you're looking to win a championship playmat, maybe you're not going to get away with just about anything. But proof is in the pudding that Aggro has been very good. Like Doc Aggro, period. Whether it's Sapphire, whether it's Amethyst, whether it's Amber, they've all been very, very good. So because of that, that's a very easy way to lean. Pick your poison with your Doc decks, go in, pick up a Scar if you haven't yet. Honestly, very good chance to also win a playmat. Sapphire Steel had multiple wins. Amber Steel had multiple wins. Amethyst Steel had multiple wins. Like lots of different ways to win with Doc right now. So that's definitely a way to lean in and go into those matchups. That's my key takeaway. But listen, if you want to know more about Baja Blast, I don't know why you haven't yet, but let's be honest. Check out this video. It's in the description below. It's also right here on the screen. We're going to be covering it on the Metafy this week as well. So if you have not heard it, you want more about it, check it out right now. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're new here, hit subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.